Welcome on into another edition of Love of the Star. Love of the Star is indeed an Audacy podcast, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate you joining us once again as the Cowboy news is always flowing. Zach Wolchuk alongside the Super Bowl winning scout, Brian Broaddus. Brian, we were discussing yesterday as we're recording on a Saturday morning. We were kind of at the second half of our show, G-Bag Nation. You can catch 2 to 7 p.m. on 105 through the Fan, the flagship home of the Cowboys, also an Audacy station. Michael Gallup, former Cowboys receiver, got the report that he wants to make an NFL comeback. He wants to unretire. It was funny. We were kicking this around, and I don't think like any of us had massive – okay, if you were going to bring Michael Gallup back, you're breaking the bank to bring him back. No, okay, you kick the tires on this, veteran minimum, see what he can do. He's another year removed from the injury, which clearly he was not the same player after. I think confidence was waning there. He might have been dealing with some stuff, in his personal life off the field that also was impacting things. And so, I was wondering, this is a team that does need receiver help, and that's a guy they're familiar with. You bring him in, hey, maybe he's no good, but it's no harm, no foul, really, if it's a veteran minimum deal. But goodness gracious, Cowboys Nation, Brian, did not seem super excited about a Michael Gallup reunion.
No, and I think it's just kind of the way that it ended for Michael Gallup, and there was times where Michael Gallup was when you watched him play, he made some incredible plays. The body control, the balance, the contested catches or the contorted catches that he would make. But there was so much put on him to be that guy, to be really that number 2 guy, and he failed at it. The injuries, that was a problem. His confidence was a problem. Some of the things he was doing with off the field, that was a problem. All these things affected him in a way that he was trying to do his best to get through this and all that. And like the fans are like, no, man, you're here to do a job. And, they didn't want to hear that. They wanted a guy that was, that they gave a contract extension to. And so I could see why the fan base is not thrilled about it. He's an older guy now, but you're right. If they were willing to bring Zeke back, then you think that they would be willing to take a look at Michael Gallup as well. But like I say, when Michael Gallup left here, he was really the shell of a player. And have things changed? I think you need to go find that all out. Because at one time he was a guy that had some promise, but as the year wore on, he wasn't nearly the receiver that you need, and I could see why people want to move on from that.
Yeah, I mean, I saw like, hey, if you don't want to go back to a guy that you already moved on from, I totally understand the apprehension there, but. I feel like just knowing what I know about Michael Gallup, and we got to spend some time around him. He was always a super, super sweet guy.
Great guy.
Was always gracious with his time. And maybe that is. Maybe it's like I got a soft spot for him because I like the dude personally.
Sure.
But there was a connection there with Dak Prescott. And I think I'm also looking through it from a Cowboys lens where we know this isn't a team that likes to go out and spend a ton of money to fill needs in free agency. Now, maybe this year will be different. They've talked like, okay, and you've said it before, maybe they are willing to go like tier 2 level free agents this year. It's not bottom of the barrel. They're not going to spend on the top of the market, but the mid-level guys. Michael Gallup could be considered, in no disrespect, that would be a bottom of the barrel type of signing. But he's a guy that's got a lot of familiarity, and I don't think that he would be wanting to come back if he didn't think he was fully right this go around. So hey, it could just be I'm overly optimistic about the chances there. But again, I just feel like if it's a low cost deal, it's a 1 year prove it type of thing. Heck, maybe he doesn't even make the roster out of camp. But I don't think there's a lot of harm involved in that.
No, there never is. Not when you're talking about a lower when these contracts, when it's really like you say a prove it deal. The one thing they have committed is, and we kind of forget this, Zach, when we talk about it, is they've committed $5 million to Turpin. If you think about it, if with the tender, so and so you're going to need, me personally, I could very well see 11 personnel, a high draft pick, Lamb, and Turpin. That's what I could see 11 personnel as. And, and maybe, maybe there'll be some interchangeable stuff with Lamb playing in the slot. Turpin's proven he could play outside a little bit. I don't think you want him playing there a ton, but where would a Michael Gallup fit? It's a, he would compete with Brooks. He would compete with Turpin. I'll say this, I'm more disappointed with Turpin. And what's funny is that I'm starting to understand metrics with this, with the APY stuff. And they were saying that Turpin was playing like a $10 million player. I don't know about you. I didn't see a $10 million player out there. And this is grades again with Pro Football Focus, and they're in partnership with overthecap.com. And I love looking at those numbers. Because it gave me an idea when Oso Digizua got signed, the metrics said that he was playing like a $19 million a year player. Well, what did you get him at? You got him basically at $20 million a year. So I think the metrics do show some good things of what a player's value might be. But I know they've made a commitment, with the second round tender to Turpin. They're going to need some help, but I think the help is going to come from a draft pick. I think that help is going to come from pick 12, pick 44, something like that. I think that if they're going to want to address the help that Lamb needs, it's going to have to be at 12 or at 44. When you get into the third and fifth rounds and stuff like that, it doesn't jive with what you're talking about with Gallup, because you're right. It's a low cost, no risk deal. But they have made a commitment to Turpin. Let's see if that works out, how well that works out.
No, that's a great point in terms of resources that you're using. And if you're they put that second round tender on him. So another team could make an offer to Terp. And if he ended up leaving and the Cowboys didn't want to match, Cowboys get a second round pick out of the deal. Doesn't seem like, from what we've heard right now, there are other teams that are really reaching out to try and pursue KaVontae Turpin. But when you add the special teams value in, that's something Michael Gallup's not going to give you. Right. So like Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks, Ryan Flanoy, these guys will probably be competing at the back end of the roster to give you some special teams value. Turpin as a returner is going to do that. Gallup, especially if they did draft, let's say, Tedoroa McMillan out of Arizona, fell to you at 12, which I know, I think both of us would really be like, that's a no-brainer. If he's there at 12, we're running the card in, we're selecting that guy. He's wide receiver 1 on my board. I think he's wide receiver 1 on yours. So that would kind of all of a sudden, it's like, you're right. Where's the fit here for Michael Gallup? But if they went another route at wide receiver at 12, because I know when you and I get together, I think fans like to hear the draft talk. If it's not Tet McMillan, is there another receiver there that you think is a good complement next to CeeDee Lamb at 12? Do you think that they would go someone other than Tet McMillan there? Or do you think it would be another position?
I don't know how much they like Ibuka from Ohio State. I don't know how much they like Golden from Texas. To me, when you start to look at, I think that Luther Burden from Missouri is more like what CD would do. I think with Ibuka, the thing I really like about Ibuka is that he has played the role of Robin to the Batman or Robin scenarios that we like to talk about. He's played the role of the number 2 to some really, really talented receivers. And he's a very talented one himself. On a lot of teams, if he were to be drafted by them, he might even be a 1 on some of these teams' boards. But he's played the role of a 2, and he's done it very, very well. He's done it at a high level. Him Golden, and this isn't just about Golden running well at the combine. Golden is a really, really, really good player. I would go, but on my board I have Burden over Ibuka, and
You do
really
okay.
is so I. But the thing about it is with Ibuka, I think where I need to, I'm trying to just as I'm looking at it as my board. I'm not really looking at it as the Dallas Cowboys board. But if you were telling me the Dallas Cowboys board, I would wonder if they would have Ibuka over Burden because of things I just talked about. The ability to play on the outside, the ability to play the X, the ability to do the crossing routes, the slant stuff, things that you really kind of don't want. You don't want CD running a bunch of slants. You don't want CD to run some crossing routes and stuff like that when it's get him going and throw him the ball underneath. We saw him at Texas, when he was at Oklahoma, just kill people doing that. Run, catch, catch, run. I'm sorry. In that way. But I think that, where they struggle, they were trying like heck. I throw the ball to Cooks on slants. And the thing with, and the thing that kind of was thing about with Gallup, they were trying to throw Gallup to slants, and he just doesn't have confidence in his hands. He's a body catcher. I mean, he contorts his body. You need somebody that's going to go snatch that football. And, I look at my board as we speak, and you see guys that have that kind of ability. I think that you look at Besh from TCU, Ayamanor from Stanford, Williams from TCU. I really do like Royals from Utah State. I'm looking for a bigger Bryant from Illinois would be a guy, but that's a little bit of a later type of a guy. But I'm looking for somebody, if you're going to tell me that I'm going to use Turpin, I'm going to use Lamb, I need somebody that kind of fits the mold, that handles the other kind of the stunt man, if you would say, the dirty work guy, the guy that's got really good hands, it's big body, they catch the ball inside. We worry about separation and all that. I mean, there's some receivers in this draft that are really, really good at catching contested balls. The guy you talked about, McMillan, is one of the best. We talk about 50-50 balls every day with receivers. McMillan is more of a 70-30 guy. He's 70-30. He puts the secondary at a disadvantage covering him with his height, his length, and his ability to go get the football. That he puts defensive backs, and you can say, well, he doesn't run, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. Geez, there's a lot of things that he does that can help your team win every day, just by his ability and the things I mentioned: the length, the size, the ability to escape. He makes people miss. You watch him play in the open field, he makes people miss with the ball in his hands. So if you want to sit there and focus on, well, we don't know what he runs, he doesn't do this, does that, focus on the things that I think that he does really, really well that translate to the NFL. So to me, that's the kind of guy I'm looking for. I know this is a long conversation, but I'm looking for a guy that can help Turpin and can also help Lamb when they get in their 11 personnel stuff.
No, but I think it's a needed conversation, because I do think wide receiver, to your point, is up for consideration, and it's under consideration high, because now you're going to go into year 4 of Jalen Tolbert, and I don't think that's a guy you're bringing back unless he goes out there and he has a massive contract year. This is probably it. I mean,
I didn't see it. Yeah, I didn't see the $10 million player. I'm sorry, I didn't see the $10 million player. That, the APY of playing like a $10 million player. I thought there was there would be 1 or 2 games, a Pittsburgh game or something like that, where he'd show up, and then there are 3 other games where he was not a factor in the game. So that's kind of where I'm at with Tolbert.
Disappear. Yeah.
Disappears. And I think Gallup had that. I think Gallup had some of those issues too. Maybe a good game, maybe a 5 or 6 catch game, and then the next 4 games he was maybe 1 catch. I think that's
I mean, just to put a bow on this one, I
Yeah.
think Trey Harris would be another receiver you could throw in there
Sure.
from Ole Miss, big
Sure.
body, 6'2", 205,
Sure.
could be there at 44. One thing you were talking about when you said like the dirty work receiver to complement, I think, and I don't know how much the blocking ability when you're talking about these guys, like as the scouts and if the Cowboys value that, but as they're starting to put a premium on the running game, there might not be a better blocking receiver that I've seen in the last few years than Emeka Egbuka. That dude,
Oh,
I mean,
no.
they'll move him
Yeah.
around matchup wise. Like that dude will go out there and block and put his body on the line.
Yeah. And I'm sure people are watching this right now and they're going, well, Broadus, Zach, traded a 4th round pick for Mingo. Where's that? Where's that? I would say sure. But I haven't seen it yet. I tell you what, when you say blocking, one of the things that Jonathan Mingo is really good at is point of attack blocking. And if you're going to run pin and pulls and crack tosses and stuff like that, Jonathan Mingo has proven to me that watching him play. But I've never seen a team that had more trouble getting. Both teams he played for, Carolina had trouble getting him the ball, and Dallas had trouble getting him the ball. I'm watching a little bit. I was watching the Commanders game from Week 18 because I was watching Jonathan Allen, the tackle, and they throw a fade to Mingo in the corner. Trey Lance tries to hit him on a fade down there, and Trey can't get him the ball. But you're like, every time they try and get him the ball, it seems like it's not nothing clean about it. It wasn't, there wasn't anything, that like, oh, well, that's a clean opportunity for him. Everything was contested. Everything was kind of behind him on the ground. It just never was anything that he could really do. So I'm interested to see. I think they're a lot higher on Jonathan Mingo than I am. They had a grade basically of a 1.20, which is the top of the 2nd round for this player. They really, really like this guy a lot. So I'm willing to see that maybe that's your big body guy. Maybe that's your guy, that could come in here. But it's kind of like I have an idea of Tolbert. I'm really kind of tired of waiting on Tolbert, and I'm tired of waiting on some of these guys. They need to go out and get guys that are ready to play, plug them in, let them go, let them be productive. And Abuka is that kind of guy. I think that McMillan's that kind of guy. I think Golden could be that kind of guy. So I'm more interested in those guys than what we currently have, with the exception of, like I say, Mingo. He to me, he just hasn't had the chance yet to play. I mean, Mingo came into a situation where he and with Dak, we'll see with him and Dak how that works out.
Fingers crossed, because they did give up before, and I'll be honest with you, as we were going through the depth chart, Brian, I totally forgot Jonathan Mingo was on the team. That's kind of where we're at right now. So hopefully he's able to emerge for him, and maybe he's turning some heads when we get out there and we're watching on the practice fields in Oxnard. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast, and you can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. Zach Wolchuk, Brian Broadus, it's time for the Dean Julia mailbag, and we've got some good questions. You can always follow us at Zach Wolchuk on Twitter, at Brian Broadus, at Eric Chiafalo as well when he's able to slide in here and do this. This is kind of one that is a topic of today, because Greg Burnett wanted to ask, if the Cowboys bypass running back early in the draft, what are some guys that you'd like to see them go after in free agency outside of Rico? There was a report this morning that came out from Calvin Watkins that as Rico enters free agency, he's looking at a command of $6 million per year would be the average salary. And there are several other teams that are interested in his services. So you could bring back Rico. The other two names that I talked about with you guys this week on the G-Bag Nation, for whatever reason, Vegas has the Cowboys as the favorites to sign Aaron Jones. And then there were reports coming out of Pittsburgh. I know Andrew Filipponi, who works with our sister station there, The Fan in Pittsburgh, was saying his expectation is the Steelers don't re-sign Najee Harris, and he signs with the Dallas Cowboys. So those were two names outside of Rico. Aaron Jones, who was just with Minnesota and has been a Cowboy killer throughout his career, went to college at UTEP, University of Texas, El Paso, and then Najee Harris, former first-round pick out of Alabama.
Yeah, and it's not surprising to see that teams are interested in Rico Dowdle, and $6 million a year is right about where that APY for where he was playing. And I think teams look at these things and I think they say, okay, that's about what this player's value is worth. You and I are in that mode right now of really honing in on some of these college guys, and we've talked about Ashton Genty to the point of if he's there, you got to consider him. But I think where it really is very fascinating to me, I have yet, and I know he's asking for veteran guys and stuff like that. This is where I might not go the veteran guy route. If I don't get Rico done, this is where I might take, whether it's pick 12 or pick 44, and parlay that thing with another pick with the 5th round pick, and see. I have yet to watch a running back, Zach, and I don't know about you. I'm just speaking for myself. I've yet to watch a running back that I'm really just totally out on. I mean, all these college kids, I probably looked at 20 running backs, and
There's
I
a
feel
lot
like
this year.
I feel like that. Listen, why do I have to go get Aaron Jones or go get Najee Harris? And I know this doesn't answer the gentleman's question, but I'm kind of looking at this. You want to talk about double dip positions? We'll see what I'm not relying on Deuce Vaughn, and I know people out there are listening to our broadcast, and they're like, well, "What about Deuce Vaughn?" Deuce Vaughn does nothing for me. He does nothing for me. I can't get him on the field. I can't get him to the game. He doesn't play special teams. He just doesn't do anything for me. And I know it's like, well, new line coach, his old coach from Kansas State and all that. No, even when they were running the ball last year a little bit at the end, he wasn't able to run the ball. I mean, it wasn't. I've moved on from that. It's like I've moved on from Tolbert. I've moved on from thinking about Deuce Vaughn. But I'm kind of, if you give me a position to double dip, I might look at a 1st or 2nd round running back, and I might look at another one in that 5th round, because I think that you could get some really good value out of the. There's going to be a lot of times where you and I are going to be working on the 3 days of the draft, and Kyle Yeomans is going to ask you. He goes, "Well, hey, who's your best player left on the board now?" There's going to be a lot of times you're going to say a running back's name. You're going to say there's going to be probably going to be an edge. There might be even a defensive tackle, and there'll probably be a running back. Those will be the 3 positions that you constantly, and I swear to you, it's going to happen. There's not going to be linebackers. It's not going to be, it might be some corners, but the positions that are going to have some depth to it, those defensive linemen, the running backs are going to be those guys that we kind of, every time we look up, and the edge, they're going to be looking where every time we look up, it's going to be best player on the board. It's a running back. So to me, I'm kind of in that mode right now of like, I'm not interested in a veteran guy. I'd love to have Rico back, but I'm not really interested in Aaron Jones and Najee Harris and guys like that, knowing how deep and how I could get some inexpensive help. If you tell me Aaron Jones and Najee Harris is going to cost me from getting a linebacker in free agency, I want nothing to do with those guys. I'm going to try and address.
Hey man, like if it was 100%, like if it's $8 million a year for Aaron Jones, I'd rather be like, hey, Dre Greenlaw. I don't know what San Francisco's offering you. They want to give you a prove it deal, but and I'm just throwing out a name, but I'll give you $8 million a year. Come play linebacker for me. I agree, and I love the idea, like the 2 spots to double dip this year. And I know they re-signed Osa. To me, defensive tackle still in play.
Defensive tackle,
I'd be double dipping
still in
running
play
back,
too.
defensive tackle.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong at all. I don't think you're wrong at all. To me, double dip in the positions that have some depth to it. If I could get down through the 5th round of running backs, and I still got some running backs to look at. There's some, but every running back that I've looked at kind of fills a role or a void of something that you might, okay, maybe this guy is a little bit of a elusive guy. Maybe this guy like a Martinez from Miami, like just a run over you guy. You know, if you give me the opportunity to have, say, I draft Caleb Johnson from Iowa in the second, and then turn around and draft somebody who I have a 5th round grade on my board there. For example, that's what I'm saying. I got Martinez in the end of the 4th round, but say it doesn't. You have a chance to get one of those guys.
Out of Rutgers or something, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Hunter from Auburn. I mean, there are guys that I have in the 5th round. I mean, I keep poor Hunter from Auburn. I keep kind of dropping him down because I've looked at James from Oregon. I've looked from Neal from Kansas. I've looked for Giddings, who's a lot of people think he's from Kansas State, who thinks he's a lot better than where I have him in the 4th. Hell, you might be right. If you're that thought, Brooks from Texas Tech, maybe better than a 4th round grade. Martinez, I mentioned for Miami. Yeah. You see what I'm saying here? There are guys. There might be the guy. Yeah, Neal. I got Neal up there. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. You might be in a situation where I would rather draft a guy, inexpensive help, and then take that money for one of these Neals or Jones or one of those guys, if it's $6 to $8 million, and go look at another position.
I agree. I'm with you 100%. I think running back it's a young man's spot, and this year is the year. Go ahead and go get your guys there at running back. I'd rather do that, to your point, and put my money, especially if they're going to be very selectively aggressive. Go ahead and do that in some other spots. Here's one that's just kind of like a heartfelt question that we got here, Brian. And you and I were born and raised in Dallas, Dallas Cowboy fans. So we've got and you got the pleasure of working for the team. So we've got our media hats on, but then at times the fan in us can bleed in a little bit.
Sure.
And Keenan Womack wanted to know, well, why do I still care about this team after so long? I try not to care, but I still listen to the podcast, and I'm very excited about the draft because I think that's going to fix a lot this year. He said Super Bowl bound this year. I just have a feeling. I think they're a long way to go there, Keenan. I do. But we have seen the impact a great draft could have. And if anybody's capable of having a great draft, it's certainly Will McClay and this scouting department. I mean, their last probably great draft was when Mike McCarthy had his first year. They turned over the coaching staff, and they hit Lamb in round 1. They go ahead and hit Trayvon Diggs in round 2. But I think, at least for me, man, I love the team because it's what I know. I was born to love the Dallas Cowboys, and I do love the draft. I think the draft will always give you hope, but that's also the beauty of sports, man. Things can turn around like this. I mean, how about the other team in Dallas, where just a month ago we were all super pumped about Dallas Maverick basketball. They were coming off a finals run. A month later, what the heck has happened to that team? So things can change for you in the blink of a second in sports. And I know that there's things we can get upset about. There's things that the way the organizations run, some of the decisions they make. The bottom line is part of being a sports fan is having hope. And some people are able to jump from bandwagon to bandwagon the flavor of the week. I think loyalty makes it that much better. When you stick through and you love a team, when they finally break through and they achieve the ultimate goal, it makes that so much sweeter. We got to experience that in 2011 with the Mavs. And when it happens, because eventually it will, the loyalty we've got for our Dallas Cowboys, it's going to make it that much sweeter.
Well said. I can't add anything to what you just said. It was, you're exactly right in all points that you were able to cover there.
The other stuff we've got, and it's a little bit of a, hey, choose which one do you want? And I thought this was good from Blogging the Boys that I saw earlier. So we got a couple of questions about this, but like best combinations of players to re-sign from our free agent list. And we talked a little bit about Rico there just a second ago. Like, would you want to bring back Rico? But like, if you could have two either or, the combination of Jordan Lewis and Cooper Rush or Rico Dowdle and Chauncey Golston.
Okay, so Dowdle and Golston was the last one, right? I'm writing these down as we speak.
Dowdle and Golston.
Yeah, give me. That's interesting. That's a really interesting one because Cooper Rush has proven he can win games, and I love Jordan Lewis.
Yeah, and
what
the
he's
thing
done.
is, it's like, if you lose Dak, and it's just for a limited amount of time, like if you've got a 2 to 4 week injury from Dak, that's when you want Cooper Rush because I got a chance. If it's a season ender like would happen this year, I know there's a lot of fans that are like, darn it, I don't really want Cooper Rush starting because you might win some games you don't really want to win. I know the organization will never think that way, but from a fan lens, it's like, give me the best darn draft pick possible.
Yeah, I would have, if Kalen Carson would have played better, then maybe you think about him staying and then Lewis being able to go. Give me the okay, because if I get Dowdle, I'm probably going to draft a guy. Golston helps me a lot, but there's some depth at defensive end in this draft. I could probably replace both of those. Lewis, I think I could get a nickel corner. I know I really like the kid from Kentucky a lot. The quarterbacks I haven't really studied yet. I've got to get on that. I'm going to take the harder position to replace. I'm going to take Lewis and Rush in that combination is what I'm going to do.
I agree. I'm with you because I think running back and edge. I think it's running back, defensive tackle, edge. Those are the three deepest position groups.
I feel like I can get a couple of runners, and I feel like I can get an edge that is similar or slightly better than what we have in Golston.
Last either or, sign a Pro Bowl caliber offensive player in free agency, or a Pro Bowl caliber defensive player in free agency.
Depends on what the Pro Bowl player on offense plays.
I mean, I may like what would it be? Maybe a Devontae Adams at wide receiver. I mean, I'm trying to spitball. I don't think they'd go offensive lineman. I think like if they signed a lineman,
okay,
do you disagree? Like Will Hernandez seems like the guy.
Okay, well, when you say Pro Bowl, current Pro Bowl, like Ronnie Staley, could I sign him? Or is that
yes. Ronnie Stanley would fit that.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, because I feel like that Josh Simmons from Ohio State is still in play for me. I feel that way. Now, I feel that way. I feel he's one of the guys that would make me think about taking over McMillan or taking over Genty. That he's the one guy that would do that for me. I don't think I could do that with Mason Graham. Okay. But Simmons would make me think. So that to answer your question, if I could get you tell me I could get a Ronnie Staley, if I could get a Pro Bowl, or are you saying this guy's going to end up as a Pro Bowl player for me? I don't understand.
He'll either be he's like an established Pro Bowl guy right now.
Yeah. You can. You mentioned it about you mentioned guys that I love Bolton from Kansas City. I just do, and I love what he brings to the party. Man, a legitimate corner would make a lot of sense if you had a Pro Bowl type of a corner would make sense. I think that this. I was asked this morning, and I think it was one of the questions that was asked. I looked at this and they're like, what order? I went wide receiver, I went running back, I went defensive tackle, and I went cornerback. Those are the positions that I need to make sure in the first 4 rounds. I need to make sure in some combination, but I went receiver, running back, defensive tackle, cornerback. That's how, and here I'm just talking about an offensive tackle, but I'm just telling you Simmons would bring me off McMillan, would bring me off Genty. I don't know if, like I say, I would take Simmons over Graham, I think. And one of these corners, they've got to this cornerback room right now. I think it needs some help. But if you give me an opportunity to sign a Pro Bowl corner, okay, Ward from San Francisco, right?
Who was with the Cowboys. They traded him to Kansas City.
Tremendous player. I'm like, okay, grades, PFF grades, why this, why that? People remind me, Brian, his child passed away and he had to go through that. Makes perfect sense. He went from being in Pro Football Focus, say an high 80 player, to playing in the 60s. And you're like, well, what happened? Well, the unfortunate situation with his family is probably what happened there. So if you gave me a chance to sign Ward or have a player like Ward on my team, that would mean a lot to me. That would mean a lot.
I'm with you. I think I'd go defense as well, whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a corner. Let's go ahead and do that. I mean, heck, I think those are the spots right there. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast, and you can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, Brian, so we did have, and I know you gave a good breakdown of this yesterday on our show on G-Bag Nation. Jonathan Allen has been released from the Washington Commanders. I know when we've gotten to do, our pregame and the postgame shows, and Brad Shams always had love for those Washington D tackles, whether it was Jonathan Allen or Deron Payne. He doesn't do this with players, but he's been outspoken and like, hey, could you go get me one of those guys? That'd be nice. So Jonathan Allen was injured all of last year, came back at the end of the season, played the final 2 games, then went ahead and played in the postseason, had 3 sacks, had 7 overall quarterback pressures. But what did you see from Jonathan Allen now 8 years into the NFL, maybe on the backside of his career, then in the prime of his career? What kind of version of Jonathan Allen would you be getting if, let's say, the Cowboys wanted to bring him in?
When Jonathan Allen's on his game, he is a legitimate problem for offensive linemen to deal with. I watched him in the finale, the Cowboys and Commanders, and he and Tyler Smith had quite a battle. Tyler Smith, I thought, played very, very well against him. The thing with Jonathan Allen is that as he was coming back from the injuries that he had, he looked really rusty in the way he played. He didn't play great with his hands. He got knocked around a little bit. He got turned. He got hooked. He got reached. There were times where the ball went by him. He was off balance. He just didn't have his normal feel to his game that he normally has. He could be very disruptive. He could be very physical. He could be very strong. There's a lot of things to love about his game. And you watched him, I could say, against the Cowboys. That was a good matchup. But then you get him against Tampa. They were doing some double team stuff on him again. They were running by him. They got him. He's playing up high. They got into his body a little bit. And then you watch him against, I watched him against the Eagles in the championship game, and they did a really good job against him as well. So when he is on, he is a pain in the ass to deal with. But at the latter part of the season, he just did not look like the same player. Now, what you're hoping for is if you sign him, that you're going to get the guy that had the pressures and the sacks and things like that. Because the guy who was getting blocked, and Smith does a great job, as I mentioned, they double teamed him, they single blocked him, they turned him around, they pushed him out of the way. That's not a player you want. But now what you have to understand for the Cowboys' sake is they're going to watch the tape of him, and they're going to look at him, and they're going to have an idea of competing against him, what type of player he is. But Will McClay and Dan Quinn are best friends. And if there's a problem, why, you always wonder, okay, why I would pick up the phone and call Dan and say, okay, why now? Why now? And Dan would probably say, well, A, B, and C happened. Okay, can we deal with A, B, and C? Or do we just need to deal with B and C? A is something we can deal with B and C. So I think Will would have a really good understanding of the player. in the locker room, off the field from talking to Dan Quinn. And, I think Dan Quinn would be honest with him about it. Like, listen, don't do this. Or, hey, you know what? Your defensive tackle situation, I'd hate to say this, is you compete against us, but this guy's damn good and he would be a problem. If he was damn good and would be a problem, I think he'd still be on the roster. But something clearly happened.
You always got to wonder about that.
Something clearly happened, and I'm not trying to be Mickey Spagnola here and like, well, why did he get released? I'm not trying to be that guy, but I'm saying if you're if you're going to spend money on a guy, this guy, when you watch him play, when he's on, he is one of the best. When he's not,
I did like Micah out there recruiting. He goes.
Micah's always going to recruit. Micah's always going to recruit. Micah is one of the best recruiters you can have. He's got a platform. He's got a platform, and you know what? He wants to make his team better. You got to give him credit for that. There's a lot of things you could dislike about Micah Parsons, but one of the things is when he's bought in. He's gonna recruit. So give him credit for that.
Yeah. He sure is, and he's utilizing that platform. And he was replying to John Owning, our buddy from PFF. And John's like, oh, yeah, well, if he wants to be Osa's backup, I'm interested in Jonathan Allen. And Mike goes, well, why can't all three of us just rush together? He played the one with Deron Payne. So Mike is certainly into the idea of one Jonathan Allen. I did want to ask you about one other guy that got released because I know Cowboy fans are interested because he was heavily discussed in that draft class when the Cowboys took Zeke. Both of them teammates, won a national championship at Ohio State. But Joey Bosa gets released by the LA Chargers. And I know you're actually proven to be pretty right on your assessment of Joey Bosa. People acted like a Greg Ellis comp was just like, oh my gosh, that's disrespectful. Do people not remember Greg Ellis had a pretty damn good NFL career? I thought you were really doing a disservice to Bosa there.
No, I was trying when I compared Joey Bosa to the type of career that I think that Greg Ellis had, I thought that's kind of the player he was. And I took a lot of flack for that. And, and I think the one thing that has really, really, really hurt Joey Bosa is his lack of availability. I think that's the thing. I think I do remember the first start that Terrence Steele had against him and how they defended him that day or blocked him that day with single blocks, chips, they ran at him. They double teams, whatever you could do to kind of throw his game off. They did a nice job. But when this guy, when he's a lot like, with our guy, with Jonathan Allen, when he's on and he's healthy, he could be a problem. But the bigger thing is that you have him for week 1 and week 2, but you don't have him for week 3, 4, 5, and 6. He comes back for 3 games, and then you don't have him for week 11 and 12. There's always kind of something going on with this guy. And I just felt like that his career was going to be that way. I didn't think he would be hurt as much as he's been hurt, but I felt like he would have a good career. I didn't feel like he was going to have a great career. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's only played 28 games since 2022. Now, in those 28 games, he's been super productive. He's got 18 sacks, 14 tackles for loss.
There you go. But there you go.
The availability is a big problem, Brian, to your point there. So
big problem.
Hey, there's a couple of veteran free agents that maybe if the price is right, the Cowboys could attack. Of course, we always encourage you not only to like and subscribe to Love of the Star, but hey, we got the draft show, baby. We got the draft show on DallasCowboys.com. Did you have a final point you wanted to add to Bosa?
Yeah, real quick, though. I mean, and I do believe this. I do believe Dallas is going to play in Tier 3 and Tier 4. I don't think they're going to play in Tier 6 where they just – no. I mean, play totally in Tier 6. So if you do find value in certain players, much like they did with Cooks and Gilmore and guys like that,
sure.
If Joey Bosa turns into an 11 or $12 million player, that probably is not the direction that Dallas go. But I would not be surprised if you try and kind of figure some things out with some of these guys, whether it's Allen or Bosa. Call and see where we're at. just call and see. And if it's something that, hey, we'd be willing to do it for this, then maybe you can get on some of these guys for sure.
And they do have 4 fifth rounders. So maybe there could be something where they're scouring some other rosters, and there could be maybe they're looking at a Cooks and a Gilmore like trade. I know that was something in the mailbag we got asked about. The problem is, I don't think any of us we knew they liked Cooks. I don't think any of us really knew about the Gilmore deal until it happened. So it's just hard to look at the other rosters and know how those teams value said players. But hey, like Cooper Kupp, I think could be easily had for a 5 if they wanted him. But maybe they look at Cooper Kupp and don't see him as a fit for their team.
Yeah, I think that, Cooper Kupp's got a lot of CeeDee Lamb stuff into him. The way he plays, the knee's a problem. And he has been banged up. But man, that guy he hasn't played the level when he was NFL Offensive Player of the Year. But he still does a great job of making contested catches. The health, though, is a factor.
Always a blast here on Love of the Star. Thank you so much, Brian. As I mentioned, you can check us out 2 to 7 p.m. Central on the G-Bag Nation. Of course, also on the Audacy umbrella. The Draft Show on Tuesdays and Thursdays, DallasCowboys.com. Brian also doing excellent work with our buddy Vach Lombardi on his YouTube channel. But make sure you spread the word on Love of the Star, okay? Best place to get your Cowboys intel. Thank you so much to Peyton Russell. Of course, Eric Chiafalo. You've been listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast, and you can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much, Brian Broaddus. I'm Zach Wolchuk. Until next time, hugs and hand pounds, everybody.